Hello, and welcome to the second house, Dark Feet and Dark Wings, subtitled Reflections on the Dark of Night. I'm Shane M. Nygaard, and this is part of my series looking at the 12 houses of the Zodiac through their respective times of day and qualities of light at those times. For more on this, see my video Introduction to From Sunrise Through Nightfall. In this section, we enter the second house, not through the usual language of money and possessions alone, but through an image, the dark of night. If the ascendant is sunrise, then moving clockwise through the day, the second house belongs to those deep hours before dawn, roughly 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock in the morning, when the world has gone quiet, visibility has diminished, and we must move by another kind of knowing. This is the hour of inward value, instinctive security, and the hidden ground beneath the self. The second house asks, what is worth carrying? What can I stand on? What belongs to me, not merely as possession, but as conviction? In this house, value is not always bright, obvious, or publicly confirmed. Sometimes it must be discovered in darkness. There is a depth of night that is devoid of spectacle. It is not evening with its theatrical fade and amber beauty. It is not the mythic stroke of midnight with its dramatic symbolism. The second house belongs to the hours seemingly even later than late. It's when most of the world has surrendered to sleep and the visible world withdraws. At this hour, familiar shapes are swallowed. The ordinary certainties of daylight no longer hold. We are not navigating by brightness, applause, or recognition or display. We are moving by feel. And this becomes one of the great keys to the second house. It is not merely the house of what we visibly own. It is the house of what we know deep down to be of worth when the world is no longer lighting the path for us. If the chart unfolds as a 24-hour cycle and the ascendant is sunrise, as we've already looked at, then the second house is paradoxical. It belongs to a phase when the sun is technically moving upward, but remains wholly below the horizon. There is ascent, but no visible evidence of it. There is movement toward light, but the experience is still darkness. This is a profound image for the second house. It teaches that security does not always begin with certainty. Worth does not always arrive with proof. Sometimes we are rising before we can see that we are rising. Sometimes we are becoming more rooted, more resourced, more inwardly steady, long before the external world confirms it. The second house, then, is not just what I have, it is the hidden strengthening of the ground beneath us. Traditionally, the second house is associated with money, income, possessions, personal resources, and material security. And those meanings matter. Money is one of the ways value becomes legible in the material world. It is one of the ways we exchange energy, support survival, and build stability. But money is not the deepest meaning of this house. Beneath currency is value. Beneath possession is worth. Beneath accumulation is the more searching question, what do I actually value? What matters to me when no one is watching? What would I protect, cultivate, or carry forward, even if it were not admired by anyone else? Many people can name what they own more easily than what they value. The second house asks us to go deeper than inventory. It asks for discernment. So poet Wendell Berry gives us one of the most perfect poetic keys to this house. To know the dark, go dark, go without sight. The point is not to bring daylight into darkness and conquer it. The point is to learn darkness on its own terms, to move without sight, to discover that the dark too blooms and sings and is traveled by dark feet and dark wings. That is a strikingly second house initiation. The house of values does not always reveal itself through bright declarations. Often we learn what we value by entering conditions where external visibility falls away. In darkness, price becomes less persuasive. Status becomes less convincing. What remains is quieter, more instinctive, truer. The second house asks us to feel our way toward worth. Psychologist Carl Jung's instruction is essential here. Stick with the image. Astrology becomes too thin when we rush immediately into key words like money, possessions, income, resources. Those words are useful, but they do not yet give us the soul of the second house. The image does. When we remain with the dark of night, the whole house deepens. We begin to understand that value is not merely practical, it is imagistic, imaginal. It has atmosphere, it has memory, it has roots. To remain with the image is to let the symbol speak in its own language before we reduce it to interpretation. And in the case of the second house, the image says worth may be hidden, security may be felt before it is seen, value may be discovered through darkness. The second house is often called the house of possessions, but the deeper question is not simply what do I have? It is what is truly mine? Not mine in the legal sense, not mine in the acquisitive sense, mine in the sense of soul recognition. What values belong to me because I have lived them? What convictions have survived difficulty? What do I know to be of worth because experience has tested it? This house asks us to distinguish inherited values from embodied values. It asks us to notice the difference between what we were taught to prize and what our lives have shown us to cherish. In the dark of night, no one is applauding. No one is ranking. No one is selling us an image of success. So the question becomes intimate and unavoidable. What matters when I am alone with myself? In Hellenistic astrology, the second house is called Anaphora, meaning rising up. It is also one of the gates of Hades. This is crucial because it immediately tells us that the second house is not shallow materialism. It has an underworld dimension. Opposite the eighth house, the house of descent, shadow, inheritance, loss, and the dead, the second house becomes the gate of ascent. It is what we bring back. It is the treasure, the residue, the discernment, the values that rise from contact with depth. This gives the second house a striking dignity. True values are rarely decorative. They are forged. They are clarified in difficulty. They are what remain when the illusion thins. The second house is material life after underworld knowledge. The second house is an earth house, but its earth is not merely the obvious solidity of possessions. It is deeper ground. It is the ground one finds underfoot in darkness. It is the place where instinct, survival, embodiment, and value all come together. They meet. Security in this house is not only accumulation, it is rootedness. It is the capacity to say, I know what matters. I know what sustains me. I know what I can stand on. That kind of security cannot be purchased in any simple way. It has to be cultivated through lived relationship with value. This is the earthy wisdom of the second house. It reminds us that worth is not abstract. It must become ground. It must become something we can feel beneath our feet. One of the gifts of darkness is that it alters perception. In daylight, the world tells us what is there. In darkness, we must learn differently. The eyes adjust, the ears sharpen, the imagination becomes more active, the body becomes more intelligent. This is why the second house can be understood as a house of night vision. It teaches us to perceive worth before it becomes obvious. It trains us to notice what is quiet, hidden, humble, or not yet visible to others. It asks us to trust slow recognition. Not everything valuable announces itself in bright light. Some things must be sensed. Some things must be protected precisely because they are not yet ready for exposure. The second house gives us the patience to value what is still hidden. So let's look at this dark of night time, this 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock a.m. time through chart examples. And we'll have three different charts of people with very strong second house placements. As we've mentioned him, the first chart is poet Wendell Berry, who gives us a beautiful embodiment of the second house vision. With Mercury, Venus, Mars, and Pluto in the second house, his work brings language, desire, force, and underworld depth into the realm of value. Again and again, he returns to soil, the forest, field, creature, ecology, and the moral imagination required to live in right relation to the earth. Barry does not value the earth abstractly. He values it concretely, lovingly, imaginally. He sees mystery in what others might dismiss as familiar or merely practical. Even more strikingly, his imagination extends into the unseen life of the earth itself. He has a poem about what soil remembers, what it dreams of, what hidden creatures carry, what remains sacred because it has not been exposed to light. This is second house wisdom. Value does not depend on visibility. If Barry brings us into the hidden value of earth, poet Jorge Luis Borges brings us into the hidden value of thought. Borges is one of the great poets of night, of labyrinth and dream, insomnia, circular time, and unknowability. His imagination moves through spaces where the visible world is no longer sufficient. The labyrinth is especially important here. A labyrinth is not simply a puzzle. It is a passage through uncertainty. You cannot see the whole design at once. You cannot master it from above while you are inside it. You must walk it. You must trust the path while not fully understanding the pattern. That is often how values are discovered, not by declaring them once and for all, but by walking the winding path of experience until we know this matters. This is mine. This is the path I have actually lived. And our third example, Gene Roddenberry, we find that the dark of night expands into cosmic darkness. Star Trek. He had Sun, Mercury, Mars, and Neptune in his second house. And through him, the unknown becomes not merely frightening, but aspirational. The darkness of space becomes a field of exploration, imagination, and ethical possibility. This is an extraordinary extension of the second house. Roddenberry did not simply imagine technology, he imagined values. Star Trek asks, how should humanity meet the unknown? With conquest? With fear? With projection? Or with curiosity, discipline, wonder, and restraint? The prime directive is especially significant because it turns exploration into an ethical act. The second house here is not only what we possess, it is the value system by which we move through the universe. Roddenberry imagined values sturdy enough to travel into darkness. The second house is the private treasury of what matters most. It is not always the treasure that glitters. Sometimes it is discernment. Sometimes it is dignity. Sometimes it is the quiet knowledge of what we can no longer betray. To rise from the underworld is not to escape darkness unchanged. It is to bring something upward with us, a clarified value, a tested conviction, a deeper sense of self-worth, self-value. The second house asks, after darkness, what remains? What did the descent reveal? What do I now know is essential? This is why the second house belongs to self-worth as much as money. To know one's values is to stand on something real. To know what one values is to move differently through the world. In the end, the blessing of the second house is this: what is most valuable is not always what shines. What is most solid is not always what is obvious. What rises with us from the dark may become the very ground on which we stand. The second house teaches us that value can bloom in hidden places. It can sing in darkness. It can travel by dark feet and dark wings. It reminds us that the unseen is not empty and that the private work of discovering worth may be one of the deepest forms of security available to us. This is the dignity of the second house, to rise in darkness, carrying what matters. Thank you for watching. If this exploration of the second house helped you think differently about value, self-worth, security, and what we carry upward from darkness, please like, comment, and subscribe. For additional mythopoetic astrological content, visit my Substack, Mythic Currents, at mythiccurrents.substack.com.